everyone, Chris here, and welcome to my channel. Today I'm going to talk to you about the books I read between May 18th and May 24th. First up, I read Sightwitch by Susan Denard, and this is book 2.5 in the Witchland series. I gave this book 4.25 stars. So this is a mini novella in the series, and it follows, I believe, a couple of characters we meet in the first book. This series basically follows Safi, who is a truth witch, and her world is on the brink of war, and a truth witch is somebody who could be very valuable as they can tell truth from lies. Safi has never advertised that she is a truth witch, and in the first book, it is obvious that people know about the fact that she's a truth witch, and she kind of has to go on a run, and we've been following Safi and others that she's close with and has encountered since then, including Isiel, who is her best friend and has magic that she doesn't quite understand. I have really been enjoying this series, and I really enjoyed getting to see the story that is told in this book and the things we learn about the characters that this book follows. I am quite curious as to what happens next, especially now that I have this new knowledge, and I am looking forward to picking up the next book in the series. Next up, I read Tristan Strong Destroys the World by Kwami and Balia, and I gave this book 3.75 stars. This is the second book in the Tristan Strong series. In the first book, Tristan Strong, after losing his best friend, goes to stay with his grandparents and ends up having a journal that belonged to his friend stolen from him, and when he chases the person that stole it, ends up accidentally punching a hole in a tree, which ends up being like a portal to a new world where African-American folktale characters and West African gods are real, and he has to deal with the consequences of kind of punching this hole, which ends up being a hole in their sky. And in this book, we're following the events of the first one, so I can't really say anything about this book without kind of spoiling that book. But we're back with Tristan Strong in this world, and some things happen that require him to interact with these characters again. And this one was a bit slow for me. It took me a bit to get into it. I like the world, and I like getting to learn about these folktale characters and these gods. But for some reason, this isn't as interesting to me as some of the other books I've read in the Rick Riordan Presents line. I'm still enjoying Tristan's story, and it definitely left in a spot where there's no way I'm not picking up book 3. So hopefully that book will be a little faster paced, because I think my biggest issue with this is in some ways the pace feels off for me. Next up, I'm going to group these two together since they're part of the same series, and that is Ghost on the Case and Ghost Ups Her Game by Carolyn G. Hart, and these are part of the Bailey Ruth mystery series. I gave Ghost on the Case 4 stars and Ghost Ups Her Game 3 stars. In this series, Bailey Ruth is an emissary of the Department of Good Intentions, which essentially means she is a ghost sent to Earth to help out somebody in need. In Ghost on the Case, she is sent to Adelaide to help Susan, who just got a ransom call asking for $100,000 for the safe return of her little sister. Susan has no idea how she's supposed to get that money, but the caller tells her they have left her boss's study door open, as they know Susan knows how to get into her boss's safe and knows that her boss has that kind of cash just lying around. Susan feels she has no choice but to comply for the safety of her sister, and has every plan of explaining things to her boss once she gets her sister back safely. Unfortunately, her boss turns up dead the next day, which leaves Susan in one heck of a pickle, and Bailey Ruth has to figure out how to get her out of it and find out who is trying to set Susan up. In Ghost Ups Her Game, Bailey Ruth is sent to Earth to help Iris. She finds Iris standing over a body, holding the murder weapon in her hands. And while Bailey Ruth knows she wouldn't have been sent to help Iris if she had committed the murder, others don't know that, so it is not looking good for Iris. Bailey must find out the truth, despite nothing seeming to go her way in this book. So in Ghost on the Case, I really liked this story. I liked the idea that Susan had committed a crime, and she had to deal with the fact that she actually entered her boss's house and took money from him, even if she had every intention of explaining what happened to him and paying him back no matter how long it took, because at the end of the day, she was convinced her boss would understand why she did it and how important her sister was. And unfortunately, she never gets the chance to explain that. And Susan has no idea who would want to hurt her boss and why anybody would want to set her up for the murder. And on top of that, she isn't even sure how somebody would know that she could open the safe and about her relationship with her sister. So it makes things very interesting to see Bailey Ruth piece together who knew this information, who had issues with her boss, and who was willing to take those issues far enough to actually kill somebody. I really enjoyed this book, and I really liked the mystery aspect of this book and how it kind of added a twist as, like I said, Susan technically wasn't completely innocent, but she was doing it for the right reasons, and she had the best of intentions, as she never intended to lie to her boss. She just knew time was of the essence, and she needed to protect her sister. Now, with Ghosts Ups Her Game, this is easily my least favorite book in the series, and I found it very frustrating. So I saw a review on Goodreads that said that there was a gap between these two books, and that this book is done by a new publisher, and I don't know if that makes a difference, but if you had told me this was written by somebody else, I would have believed you. So there are certain rules of what Bailey is and isn't allowed to do as a ghost, and not like suggestions, because there are certain things that you're not supposed to do unless absolutely necessary, but there are literally things that she can't do. And one of those things happens in this book that she's not supposed to be able to do, and yet it is then contradicted a few pages later, and that frustrated me. And there was another instance of, again, something she isn't supposed to be able to do, where I felt like they told us earlier in the book that she couldn't do these things and needed certain information to do it, and then she goes and does it later in the book, even though she's not supposed to be able to do that, and that frustrated me. And there was just something off about this book, and I didn't like it, and I don't know if it's because I've binge read this series, and it's not, like, my most favorite series ever, and I was just kind of burnt out on it, or if I was burnt out on the genre as a whole, but, like, this book just didn't work for me the way the others did, and I'm really glad there's no more books right now, because I definitely am not in the mood to pick up another one. I will probably check out the next book in the series whenever it comes out, but if I have the same issues with that one as I do with this one, I'll probably be done with the series after that. Next up, I read Where the Lost Wander by Amy Harmon, and I gave this book 4.5 stars. In this book, we follow Naomi and her family as they head west on the Oregon Trail. One of the people they encounter is John Lowry, who is a half-Pawnee man. He is also planning to head out west with them for at least part of the way, as he and his father sell mules, and he will be delivering some mules to a fort that is on the route that Naomi and her family are going to take. Naomi and John have an instant connection and are drawn to each other. During their journey, they face many hardships, not just from the trail, but from their past that influences their present. This makes things complicated as they try to find a way to build a life together. So this book started out a little slow, which is why I didn't get the full 5 stars for me, but I did end up really, really enjoying it. This book is told from both Naomi and John's point of view, and I think that made things quite interesting. But it starts off with a bang and gives you this scene that happens way later in the book that is like, holy crap. And then it goes back to like the beginning of the story long before they get to that point where this holy crap moment happens. And that's why it was a bit slow for me, because I kept waiting for it to get to that point. So it took me a little bit to get into things, because we went from, oh my God, to normal, like their meeting and the trek west is starting. But I think it makes a lot of sense, because you know something that is going to happen to these characters, and as you're reading their story, you're starting to grow attached, and you're wishing that somehow you can change the outcome of what is going to happen. And you're also wondering, when that thing happens, how is that going to change things for the characters that you're reading about? So I really enjoyed this book, and I really enjoyed getting to see how Amy Harmon brought to life the struggle and the dangers that people faced when they went on the Oregon Trail, because that was not an easy trip for anybody back then. And I just really enjoyed getting to see Naomi and John's journey and how they grew and changed as people throughout the story. And I will definitely be reading more by Amy Harmon in the future. Next up, I read When You Trap a Tiger by Keller, and I gave this book 5 stars. In this book, we're following Lily, who moves back in with her grandmother with her family. She soon finds out that the reason they did this is because her grandmother is sick. On the way there, Lily had seen a tiger, which her mom and her sister could not see. She finds out from her grandmother that when her grandmother was younger, she stole something from the tiger, and now the tiger wants it back. Unfortunately, the tiger tries to make a deal with Lily where if she gives the stolen item back, the tiger will help her grandmother. But she knows tigers are tricky, so she isn't sure she can trust the tiger. I thought this was a really, really interesting book. Because her mom and sister can't see this tiger and you know her grandmother's sick, you have no idea whether the tiger is real throughout the story. And I think that is interesting because you're trying to figure out, is she just seeing something that nobody else can see, or is there something going on with Lily too, and is she seeing something that's not there? I also think it is interesting to see how both Lily and her mom and her sister are all dealing with the fact that their grandmother, or in her mom's case, her own mother, is sick. And for Lily especially, like, her grandmother has always represented happiness, and she is struggling to deal with the idea that her grandmother is sick and can't be the grandmother that she pictures in her head anymore because she's sick. And I think this book does such a great job dealing with Lily, processing her emotions about the situation. I absolutely love this book and the way Keller went about writing this story and showing how this family was dealing with this awful thing that was happening to them, which I feel like a lot of people can relate to, because we've all had people in our lives that were maybe sick and could be dying or might recover and we don't know, and that fear of losing somebody we love. And I think Keller did a really good job of capturing that emotion, and I just really liked this story and will definitely be checking out more from her in the future. Next up, I read Magic by Angie Sage, and I gave this book 4.5 stars. In this book, we follow the Heap family. Their seventh son, Septimus, who is the seventh son of a seventh son, is pronounced dead by the midwife. The same night that his son is pronounced dead, Silas Heap returns home with a baby girl that he had found left in the snow. He and his wife end up deciding to raise her, and they name her Jenna. But there is more to Jenna than meets the eye, and there is also more to what happened to Septimus than meets the eye as well. And this book basically follows on with what the bigger story is with Jenna and Septimus. I really enjoyed reading this book. It's a chunky one, but I listened to the audiobook and I really enjoyed the audiobook. It was interesting to see what the story was behind Jenna, as she is the main focus of this story. We do get to see a bit of the Heap family in general, and Septimus Heap is kind of hanging over everything, and you kind of wonder what happened to him, because you can tell there's more to that story than meets the eye very quickly. It is interesting finding out what is going on with Jenna and how that affects the Heap family and their lives and the journey they take throughout this book. I liked getting to see the beginning of the magic that is in this book and how that magic works and how some of the characters use that magic. I'm also very intrigued to see what happens going forward, as this is the first book in a series, and I'm curious to see where things go next based on where things ended in this book, because it kind of lands on like a cliffhanger for the Heap family. And lastly, I read A Forest Divided by Aaron Hunter, and I gave this book 4.25 stars. This is the 5th book in the 5th arc of 6 of the Warriors series. If you're new to my channel, Warriors is a series about forest cats who live in clans and have to try to coexist. In this arc, we're looking at the beginnings of the clans, and this takes place far before the events of the first arc of 6. This is the penultimate book in this arc, and we're really starting to see how the clans came to be. Like, I got so excited in this book by the end because we can really see the beginnings of those clans. Like, we're this close to being finally there, and I'm really, really curious how the 6th book is going to wrap up this arc, and how much at the end of that 6th book the clans will resemble the clans that we know when we start out reading the first arc of 6. So I'm still really, really loving this series and this look at the beginning of the clans, and I can't wait to close out this arc. So these are some of the books I've read recently. What is a book you've read recently? If you've made it this far in the video, leave me a battery emoji, like this video, and subscribe to my channel, and I'll talk to you next time. Bye!